Thank you, everyone, for coming out this day on such a pleasant day for this special event. We especially extend a warm welcome to Leah Stenson, who's co-editor of the anthology Reverberations for Fukushima, and to Kazuko Nakane, who graciously stepped forward to join Leah in presenting these poems for you. Leah's co-editor, Asao Sarukawa Aroldi, could not make it back from Switzerland. Leah Stenson, board member of Friends of William Stafford, coordinator and host of the Stonehenge Studio Series Poetry Venue in Portland, was the original editor of the Ooligan Press anthology, The Pacific Poetry Project. She has previously served as assistant editor in New York City, a teacher of English at the University of Tokyo, and the managing director of the Oregon Peace Institute. Her chapbooks include East-West, published by William Stafford Institute at the Lewis and Clark College in 2005, and Heavenly Body, Finishing Press in 2011. Kazuko Nakane is a writer and Japanese national, and she lives here in Seattle. She will join Leah in reading some of the poems in Japanese. She is the wife of the well-known poet and visual artist Alan Lau. I'll turn the program over to Leah now, who will tell us about the book and read some poems.
Thank you so much, Jay Glenn. For my poet friends in Fukushima, in requiems for the dead and prayers for the living, the voices of poets rise and reverberate from the wasteland of Fukushima, defying a silence broken only by the caw of crows and the clanging of the metal in the breeze. On the winds of hope, their words arrive on American soil. Their truth, like seeds, will be sown in the hearts of people who, in a unified plea, will also speak against the nuclear demon that must be vanquished to keep all people safe. Thank you so much for coming out this afternoon. Thank you so much to Jay Glenn and to the Green Lake Library, and for all of you people that could be out in the sun at cafes and are instead here to listen to me on this very serious topic. I'm so moved by the support of this community. And also to Kazuko Nakane for coming at the last minute to help me with the presentation in the Japanese language so you can hear the beauty of that language. As many of you know, on March 11th, the world marked the 3rd anniversary of the Great East Japan earthquake, the likes of which no Japanese alive today has ever experienced. This was followed within minutes by a powerful tsunami that swept the east coast of Tohoku, that's northeastern Japan, destroying villages and towns and killing thousands. Following the quake and tsunami, a meltdown occurred at 3 reactors in the crippled Daiichi nuclear power plant in Fukushima. The disaster really hit home. I have many deep and continuing connections with Japan. I lived there for 17 years, where I practiced Buddhism and taught English at a Japanese university. And both my husband and older daughter live and work in Tokyo. I wanted to find a way to express this great tragedy in human and emotional terms, rather than in the terms of the facts and figures we were fed in the mass media. So, being a poet, I did what poets do. I turned to poetry. I was fortunate to make a connection with a young woman in Tokyo, Asao Sarukawa Aroldi, who joined the anti-nuclear movement as a translator and interpreter following the Fukushima disaster. I was delighted when she agreed to co-edit this book of poems with me. After a protracted and difficult search for poems, Asao-san located a bilingual book of poetry with exactly the kind of poems we were looking for. I dashed off a letter to the publisher, outlining my ideas, and was pleasantly surprised when he responded immediately, giving me permission to abridge the Japanese edition and add new supplemental material. So there were 238 poems in the original. I took 50 of the best and added different material and did a little bit of editing. There were a number of different translators who worked on the originals, and I don't consider myself a translator, but I did do some tweaking of their translations. So all of this happened in lightning speed. In the world of publishing, it can take years to get something into print. So in November of 2013, I was off to Japan to discuss the project with the publisher, Mr. Suzuki at Coalsack. He assured me if I would be willing to, he asked me if I would be willing to accompany him to Fukushima to witness firsthand the destruction and desolation in the radiation-contaminated exclusion zone and to meet some of the poets who had contributed to the book. The destruction and desolation was unbelievably sad and beyond words. This was an area in which 150,000 people had been displaced, unable to return to their homes in an exclusion zone that spanned hundreds of square kilometers. We drove for miles through small towns and breathtakingly beautiful countryside without seeing anyone. At every moment, I expected someone to appear from somewhere. It was heartbreaking that this incredibly beautiful area of Japan, of sun and sea, mountains and rivers, was no longer habitable. Imagine if Portland and the entire Columbia River Gorge were to be abandoned. In Fukushima, Mr. Suzuki introduced me to Jotaro Wakamatsu, a poet and nuclear activist whose powerful poetry is based on his first-hand observations of Chernobyl. It's a very powerful poem by him, written after his trip in the 1980s to Chernobyl. It's like a precursor or foreboding of what's to happen with Fukushima, almost exactly, in some regards, very similar. Mr. Wakamatsu and Mr. Suzuki both fought against nuclear power in Japan and were stigmatized as the boys who cried wolf for raising their voices about the potential for a nuclear accident. I was so encouraged to meet Mr. Suzuki and Mr. Wakamatsu, men of deep moral character who are working hard for the sake of the people. Several days after our Fukushima trip, I was interviewed by the Tokyo Shimbun newspaper, which wanted to do a short article on my book project. Tokyo Shimbun published it as a full-length feature with a color photo on February 3rd, 2014. And the first poem I'm going to begin with is written by a woman, Rumiko Kora, and it's entitled To Give Birth. And I just thought this was a really good way to begin. To give birth. I'm not sure whether I heard it or not, that the Chinese character, to give birth, depicts a woman giving birth in a sitting position. At a childbearing hut, remaining in a village where a nuclear power plant has been built, an old woman talks about the childbearing that used to occur there. A rope for a woman to pull on, to strain her body in childbearing, hangs from the ceiling. 24 small bundles of straw are piled up against each other on the sand. The woman leans on the bundles of straw, grabs the rope, raising her body. Dark gray waves of the Japan Sea break on the shore. Falling snow disappears in the sea. A road resembling a birth canal crosses the village. Women have given birth to children in this way and have kept on bearing children. But the road always leads people in unexpected directions. People have come to a dead end, separated from one another, lost, caught up in a whirlpool, losing sight of their way home. They stand alone in a daze. I'm not sure whether I heard it or not, that the element in the character to give birth depicts a baby being born. In the childbearing hut, where light enters only from the sea, the woman who who has given birth to 4 children, says, "If you press on the anus with your heel, you can prevent the baby from going back to the womb." A narrow stream flows in front of the hut. She washes rice and cooks it there. In the olden days, when a woman left the hut after childbirth, she ducked under the waves and swam through the waves at dawn on the shore of the Japan Sea to return from death. Women have given birth in this way, have kept on giving birth, but the birth canal has eventually led to the nuclear power plant, has it not? Because we did not make an effort to determine where the road was leading us, those giving birth and those being born have become separated. Each of us now travels the road alone in the gathering dusk, but the image of a woman giving birth remains transfixed within the form of the Chinese character. Oh, how I wish to have a full blooming cherry tree. Oh, how I wish to have a full blooming cherry tree here in the center of this ice-bound white plain. Its frozen heart stolen by the faint smell of full blooming blossoms. Will the icy field forget its pride, slowly loosening itself and melt down? When pink petals fall in a breeze, slight as a girl's sigh, will the plain masked in white slowly melt away, its face now flushed, losing self-control? I wish to have a full blooming cherry tree. My heart would be at ease, covered by the swirls of falling petals. Neither with radioactive snow, nor with atomic black rain, but only with profusely falling petals will the sky warm the earth. Only with a rain of pink petals will the split and severed earth be healed. Linking the heavens and earth, oh, how I wish to have a full blooming cherry tree in the center of this icy white plain. Kazuko-san, please read for us.
花盛りの桜が欲しい。ああ、ここに花盛りの桜が一本欲しい。白く凍えてついたこの雪原の真ん中に淡い香りを放つ満開の桜に心を奪われて、固く凍った氷は虚勢を張るのも忘れ、ゆるゆると緩んで溶けていくのだろうか。かすかな風に散る花びらが少女の吐息のようにその面にかかると、白い仮面の雪原は顔を紅に染め、慎みを忘れてゆるゆると溶けていくのだろうか。花盛りの桜が一本欲しい。降りしきる薄紅の花びらが私のかじかんだ心を溶かすだろう。放射能混じりの雪でもなく、まして原子の黒い雨でもなく、薄紅の花びらを散らして世界を温める空、裂かれた大地を癒すのは薄紅の花びらの雨。天と地を結んで、ああ、この白い冷たい石原の真ん中に一本の花盛りの桜が欲しい。
The next poem is entitled A Different Version of the Record of the Living. And this poem, as well as the one following it, is addressing the situation of the plight of animals that were abandoned in Fukushima, but a different version of the record of the living. Inside the 20-kilometer radius of Fukushima No. 1 nuclear power plant, The radiation counter's needle now and then swings past the maximum. People ran away with nothing but the clothes they wore. Their pets became wild cats and wild dogs. Cows and pigs were locked in and starved to death. Maggots crawled through the skin and bones that remained. Those that survived were slaughtered. The wildlife, the animals that escaped death in a ditch, ran free in the irradiated environment. Calves were born to cows that are no longer someone's livestock. Packs of boars devastated the region in all directions. 6 kilometers from the stricken nuclear power station, ostriches had been raised, bred carefully on only a small amount of food. They were brought there to help the area prosper. They were the symbol of the nuclear power station that produced a great amount of electricity from a small amount of fuel. Their skin became bags and belts. Their eggs became cookies and cakes, and their meat tasted exotic. Thus, they became a tourist resource as domesticated animals. They couldn't thrive in the cold and high humidity, but they became mascots for the peaceful use of nuclear power. Out of 30 birds, only a few survived, including the leader. They were running around excitedly in the exclusion zone as if they were in Africa, their ancestral home. They survived for about a year before being deemed dangerous animals. 6 were caught in a culling operation and, as a consequence, were used for research to study the effects of radiation. Slogans dance vainly in the ghost towns. A rich life with a proper understanding of nuclear energy. The development of an atomic town and a prosperous future. The signs of shops have been left in the ghost towns. Atom for daily fresh conveyor belt sushi shop. Atom for a pachinko parlor, and atomic transportation for an electric supply company. The animals sacrificed for the nuclear power stations are symbols of us adults living today and of our children in the future. And this next poem is also a very poignant poem entitled Our House Dog Was Watching Us by Akira Kijima. The earth of Fukushima is reflected in its moist beige eyes, though people see only barren land in them. Domesticated animals were let loose in the fields. They calmly run around there, kicking up the ashes of death. For 10 years or 100 years, the field will keep refusing humans. Dogs, once seen on remote surveillance cameras, have disappeared from those areas. Their genes of obedience were cut off by the radiation. Will they revert to the blood of wolves that had long ago forgotten? For thousands of years or for 10,000 years, their cellular divisions will continue. What kind of evolution will these animals undergo as a result of the radiation? And in what kind of world will they live? Will there be a place for people? Dogs, accompanied by cows, pigs, and horses, raise their voices together in a battle cry on the roofs of the deserted reactor buildings. Awakened by this nightmare, I found my house dog watching me. Was it listening to the cries of the pack coming from a distant future? In its moist eyes, I found myself getting lost. Kazuko-san will again read this in translation after I finish The Pollution of Our Ancestral Land by Tsutomu Sakai. We picked edible wild plants in spring and mushrooms in autumn, but now it has approached our mountains. We can neither see it nor hear it, and it does not make any sound. It comes suddenly on the wind, falling on the earth, infiltrating the soil in a flash, lurking beneath the feet of animals, the foretaste of an opaque death. The mountains of our ancestral land are mourning. The angry voices ripple through the trees, leaves fall on the earth and sink in the water, accompanied by the melody of a koto. Our ancestral land will become a wasteland. These mountains will refuse even woodsmen now that no one is taking care of them. Without saying anything, these mountains cut a scar into the page of our future. This demands a reply from us haughty humans. What in the world have you done?
里山汚染。春は山名、秋には竹を取る。すぐ近くの山までそれはやってきた。見えない、聞こえない、物音一つ立てない。不意に飛来し、その地に降り注いだものはやがて浸潤し、動物たちの足元に潜む不透明な死への予兆になった。山は嘆いている。言葉にならない怒りを木々の葉にさざめかせ、地下に落ちる水銀の音に沈め。里山は荒れるだろう。手入れも危うく、山人も踏み込めない今となれば。何一つ告げないまま、里山は未来のページに刻印するのだ。思い上がった人間たちに向けて、お前たちは一体何をしてきたのか。
So this next poem, as I'm promised, is a little black humor, and it's in the form of a dialogue. It's entitled Fresh Air. It's by poet Yukari Muto, so actually a woman. So, hey there, elderly gentlemen. Would you please close the windows? There was an accident at the nearby plant, and radioactive material is in the air. Ha ha ha! Dear nurse, it's hot today, I tell you. We need fresh air, fresh air. Mister, it's dangerous to keep the windows open. The official report warned about it, you know. Ha ha ha! But I can't stand the smell because that guy wet his pants, you know. But it's not good to breathe in the air outside. How can I make you understand it? Dear nurse, nothing is in the air, you see. Ha ha ha! So, you know, and that's really the way it is, because I traveled to the nuclear exclusion zone, and I was there on a beautiful day in November, and it was just like this. And you're walking around, and it's like, what's wrong with this picture? Everything is perfect. You can't see, you can't smell, you can't taste. It's so insidious. It's hard to comprehend. But anyway, this is Masayuki Nomoto's poem, and I have to explain one thing about it. The pronunciation of the word Fukushima, everybody says Fukushima, and I've said that too myself because I'm so used to the American pronunciation. But the correct pronunciation is Fukushima. And I try to correct my pronunciation when I read, but sometimes I slip back to the... And the reason why it's Fukushima is because when you write that word in, you know, a loan word in a script called katakana, which the Japanese use to write loan words or words from other languages, it comes out as Fukushima. So everybody says Fukushima, but it's actually Fukushima. So this poet references that in the first line of the poem, which is why I'm taking some time to explain it so you'll understand what he's talking about. My home, Namie Machi. When did Fukushima become Fukushima? Fukushima, which is written with Chinese characters meaning lucky island, is now written in katakana, a phonetic script for non-Japanese words. I was born and raised in Fukushima, in the place called Namie Machi in Futaba County. It used to be a verdant town with the sea and the mountains and 2 beautiful rivers. Why did we have to flee? Answer me. I liked Namie Machi. I liked it more than anyone. I went fishing when I was a child. I caught birds. I played in the mountains and the rivers. I watched the floating clouds lying in a field. Everything was beautiful. People had beautiful hearts. They remained pure even after they had grown up. They had flowers for all 4 seasons, and people were kind-hearted. My home, Namie Machi. I must come back to this land someday by all means, even if it means hobbling with a cane. I must come back to my home, Namie Machi.
Waga Namie Machi. いつから福島が福島になったのか。美島、福島がカタカナ文字の福島に。福島県に私は生まれ育った。それも双葉郡浪江町というところに。海があり、山があり、2つの美しい川があり、緑の豊かな町だった。なぜそこを追われなければならないのか、答えてくれ。私は浪江町が好きだった。誰よりも好きだった。子供の頃は魚釣りをした。鳥刺しをした。山や川で遊んだ。野原に寝転んで流れゆく雲を見た。みんな美しかった。美しい心をしていた。大人になっても純粋なままだった。四季折々の花が咲き、人々は優しい気持ちをしていた。我が浪江町。この地に、いつの日にか、必ずや帰らなければならぬ。血を張っても帰らなければならぬ。杖をついても帰らなければならぬ。我が郷里、浪江町に。
Kazuko-san, thank you so much for that heartfelt reading. That was beautiful. And I'm sad to say that I just read the other day on Beyond Nuclear. It's a really incredible website. If you're looking for up-to-date information on what's going on in the nuclear travesties of the world, I highly recommend that site. They were saying that now the government is actually stopping the payment of the $1,000 monthly stipend to nuclear refugees and is like closing down the barrack-type temporary shelters in an attempt to make the people move back, even though things are far from resolved and it's still dangerous. This so-called cleanup is predicted to go on for 30 to 40 years. So they're not out of the woods yet. I mean, they haven't even gotten to the cores of the reactors in Fukushima. It's just incredible that they're trying to force the people to go back into these potentially dangerous environments. So this is Einstein's Voice, and this was written by Hiroyoshi Komatsu. And there's 2 things you need to know about this poem. It references a bamboo pole seller. When I lived in Japan in the 70s and 80s, there still were these bamboo pole sellers. And although the poles were no longer bamboo, they were aluminum, But they would come around like on good humor truck type of thing, and they would come around and they'd sing, "Bamboo poles for sale," and people would run out and buy a pole. And they would put it on these stanchions that they'd have on their veranda or in their gardens and hang their futon on that or their laundry. So that's one reference. And then I trust everybody knows the expression in Yiddish or German, oy vey? Yeah. Right, okay. Einstein's voice. Bamboo poles for sale. Bamboo poles for sale. While I'm reading the newspaper, reclining in the afternoon on a summer's day, I hear the sing-song cry of a man selling laundry poles. The atomic bomb, Little Boy, was dropped on Hiroshima at 15 minutes and 17 seconds past 9 a.m. August 6th, Tinian time. It is said, when the news reached Einstein, who had contributed to the Manhattan Project, he just uttered a groan. Oy vey! And, in similar words, in a will, he wrote 5 months before his death, "If I had my life to live over again, I would like to be a tinsmith or traveling salesman, not a scientist or a teacher." Bamboo poles for sale. Bamboo poles for sale. Bamboo poles for sale. Nobody seems to be buying any bamboo poles. Outside the windows, the sky is clear, like in Hiroshima. Oy vey! Did you turn at the street corner? The voice of the traveling salesman, Einstein, is fading further away. And the next one is equally as heavy, if not heavier, like tomatoes. And this is, we have to know the term hibakusha. Does everyone know that term? It's very interesting. That word is now becoming a loan word in English. A lot of people know it. It refers to the people that were victimized by the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Hibakusha. Like tomatoes. I place the frying pan on the fire, grease it, and put some cherry tomatoes in it. Their thin skin peels off crisply. Red flesh is exposed. Oil soaks in steadily. Sauce seeps in gradually. They look hurt. The skin of hibakusha peels off, dangling from their red flesh. Their lymph oozes out. They feel thirsty. On that day, human beings were burned like tomatoes. The burned tomatoes ran around in disarray on white feet, the result of the devil's toy. Two more poems. And this one is Site Where Dangerous Objects Are Buried by Mariko Fukuda. You can't pick raspberries or make raspberry preserves from an area tainted with radioactivity from nuclear power. You have to kill all those birds and animals now dancing before your eyes and bury them in a dark hole. Site where dangerous objects are buried. What a chilling sign. Such dreadful things are unheard of even in the old tales of hell. Full of life, the flowery fields of spring all at once shed blood and died. Not only died, but continued burning with vengeful thoughts. Site where dangerous objects are buried. You can neither go into the woods nor cleanse your heart by picnicking in the fields. You fear the direction of the wind from where the cesium flowers bloom. Those who have gone there never return. How would you explain to God what mankind has done to repeat such a stupid act, causing those who go there to never return? The question is in the eyes of a young girl. Indeed, how would you explain it? Isn't it said that our life is enriched by recollecting the old days, our memory enhanced by our emotion? 5-year-olds listen to the news. 6-year-olds walk in demonstrations. 7-year-olds worry about the contamination of sand, cars, and flowers. So reported the West German weekly magazine Stern. Little hearts of children ought to be filled with small pleasures, but now there is no pleasure like a secret garden in the woods or parks, sight where dangerous objects are buried. The harsh sight of this sign brings foreboding that ripples darkly. From which direction does the wind blow today? There are no more stories for children here. So, as I say, there are some hopeful signs, and I just read the other day that in Kansai, which is a very spirited area of Japan, Osaka, south of Tokyo, the people, for the first time in the history of the nuclear movement in Japan, defeated the government and the electric company, which in that place is called Kansai Electric. They defeated them. 200 citizens fought in the courts, and they prevented the Ohi nuclear power plant from reopening. Yes. And Jotaro Wakamatsu, one of the poets in this book, he fought for 40 years against the Fukushima Daiichi plant. 40 years. And you know what he got for his efforts? Ostracism by the people in his community, because they wanted that plant. It meant revenue. It meant money. He tried to warn them, but now they're poised in Japan. Prime Minister Abe wants to restart all the reactors. They're tired of paying the coal bills, and now everything's died down. They want to get back to business as usual. So it's a very critical juncture for Japan. So anyway, I want to end on this note to the new generations. We have to apologize to you for having deprived you of the ground where you would have been able to walk barefoot, the snowy fields into which you might have plunged with abandon, the shallow brooks that you could have splashed through, the woods where you might have enjoyed sunbeams through the leaves, colorful pools of fallen leaves, crops safe and full of energy from the earth. We have to apologize to you for having exchanged lovely days for dirty money because of our ignorance, lack of awareness, and stupidity, for the lies of the gorgeous illuminations we conveyed, for conveniences of life that you can control with a finger, for a delicious lunch emitting 490 becquerels of cesium, for beautifully dished up dinners of genetically modified ingredients. We have to apologize to you for your damaged genes, for the cesium detected in your body, for your swollen thyroid gland. What we can do now is to keep searching for the truth, giving our warnings, fighting on, fleeing together, checking and selecting vegetables, meat, and fish, reconstructing our daily life with our own hands. Let's start again from the beginning, from the very first day when the ocean was still clean, the soil was still fresh, without forgetting the day that we human beings made a big mistake, the day the nuclear power plant began walking toward all mothers' wombs, toward the origin of life. Thank you very much.
Poetry. So on page 85 is Stealth by Koichi Omura. In the destroyed city, a form clad in white is reflected in the cracked and warped mirror as it passes by. Its body is shattered, its parts disconnected. The left side of its face is in stark contrast to the right. Almost everything is reflected as a shattered image. In other words, the mirror shows almost nothing, or should I say everything is invisible. Its face is invisible, hidden from everyone. This is how my body, my reflection, is projected in this world now. Never will I live with a clear conscience. The big doubt lies over everyone, contaminating them. No one knows where to look for answers. We are looking only for a rehash of yesterday's joys. Whoever tries to deceive, or however I try to deceive myself, we already know that in the world we contaminated with our own hands, my shattered image will never be restored, that the shadow of death hangs heavy on everyone's back. So this poem surely is in honor of every man and woman who found sometime later in their career that the thing that they had given their life's work to ended up being harmful.
Would you put your name in there?
Oh yes, I'm Hank Davis. Hello. I'm a poet and a musician from here in Seattle. The Four Culture people have a Poetry on Buses project that is accepting poems until the end of this month. Here's the one I sent in. It's for my mom. The title begins with the name of a famous Tang Dynasty poet. Ba Chu Yi retraces his steps. Monday, after a rare week with my family, the streets outside look unfamiliar. When do we reach Willoughby? Instead, I shuffle off to work, writing instructions nobody reads. Home survives in my notebook, where they've all been up for hours, getting about their distant lives. So less than 50 words, and that's for my mom, who passed away in April. I'm delighted to be reading this poem here, which is currently available on the PoetsWest site. The 10th Fukushima Health Management Survey. This is built from news reports. There was an NHK interview with a survivor. They said, well, at least you've survived to keep on with your lives and remember those who are gone. And she looked at the interviewer and said, I'm not convinced it's a good thing that I was left here to mourn. The 10th Fukushima Health Management Survey. The Fukushima mothers chew over the official lies, the way their grandmothers gnawed on worn shoe leather. Of their 100,000 children, half now have thyroid roses caught in their throats. Yet the doctor can't say why. He knows why. Everyone knows. The tsunami choked the coolant pumps, then the reactors boiled the angry surge into radioactive mist. For weeks afterward, the survivors walked their dogs to calm them, pausing to chat and leave groceries on their neighbors' doorsteps. Now their kids' throats are riper than leftover sushi. It's a wonder that the flounders piling up in local markets don't glow like flashlights from their flat eyes. The doctor can't know. His own family would call him an idiot for consigning them to poverty merely for stating the obvious. Their government has determined, once again, that nothing can be proven. Research will continue. Like the pilot fish that cling to the shark's belly, we must give thanks for the monster's scraps. The utility begs their investors for confidence, while up and down the disfigured coast, drunken gulls meander in contrary spirals. In Natori, families light up the field beside Yoriagi School with candles placed in the shape of the Milky Way, each flame sheltered from the wind by a hand-painted paper bag, translucent with the names of those they have lost. I also have written a song on that subject. I'll spare you most of it, but sing you the last verse. I like it. It's a good song. The last verse is based on something written by an American named Ann Thompson, who was living in Sendai, and she posted a blog note called A Letter from Sendai, which went viral and many people have read. When the power comes back on, she writes, friends from way back when, we feel tremors every quarter hour and they might never end. But I come home to find food and fresh water left by strangers who walk their dogs to calm them, say hello and gently linger. Without showers we feel grubby, but old habits do kick in. We slide our doors wide open and our neighbors once again. We barely do what we must, don't get around to what we ought to, but sing a lullaby for the folks across the water as they gather under stars scattered wide across the night to share a meal together by the flickering candlelight. So there's for Fukushima.
Our many thanks to Lena for putting the program together for us. Thank you very much for coming, and I would appreciate it if you could help us put the chairs back.